If you have been told you have a fatty liver, or if you have been diagnosed with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, there is something critically important you need to understand right away. This condition is not a life sentence. It is fully reversible. And not just reversible slowly over years, but reversible quickly with measurable improvements showing up in your blood work in a matter of weeks when you make the right changes. The problem is that most people who get this diagnosis are given vague advice, told to eat better and exercise more, and sent home with very little understanding of what is actually happening in their liver, what is driving it, or what specifically needs to change. And without that understanding, most people make partial changes at best, improvements that are too slow and too incomplete to get ahead of a condition that, left unaddressed, can progress from fatty liver to a more severe inflammatory form called non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, and from there to fibrosis, to cirrhosis, and ultimately to liver failure. So in this video, we are going to go all the way. We are going to cover exactly what causes fatty liver, the specific foods driving it that most people are still eating, the dietary and lifestyle changes with the strongest evidence behind them, and the supplements that can accelerate your recovery. By the end, you will have a complete and actionable plan to start reversing your fatty liver as fast as the science allows. Part 1. What is fatty liver and why does it matter? The liver is one of the most remarkable organs in the human body. It performs over 500 essential functions. It filters toxins from the blood, produces bile for digestion, regulates blood sugar, manufactures proteins, stores vitamins and minerals, and processes virtually everything you eat or drink before it reaches the rest of your body. The liver is the metabolic headquarters of your entire system. When it is healthy, it runs lean and efficient. When it accumulates fat, everything downstream starts to suffer. Fatty liver disease, specifically non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, occurs when fat makes up more than 5% of the liver's total weight. In the early stage, the liver is fatty, but not yet significantly inflamed. This is called hepatic steatosis. At this stage, the condition is entirely reversible with the right interventions, and many people have no symptoms at all. The liver can look normal on a physical exam. You might not feel anything wrong, but the metabolic dysfunction is already underway. If the fatty liver goes unaddressed, in a significant percentage of people, the condition progresses to non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, also referred to as NASH. This is where the fat in the liver begins to cause active inflammation and cell damage. At this stage, the condition is still reversible, but it requires more aggressive intervention and the timeline is longer. If NASH is not addressed, it can progress to fibrosis, which is scarring of the liver tissue. Fibrosis can progress to cirrhosis, which is advanced scarring where large portions of the liver have been permanently replaced by scar tissue. At cirrhosis, the liver has lost a significant portion of its functional capacity and the damage is no longer reversible. A liver transplant becomes the only option. This is why urgency matters. The window for reversal is wide in the early stages and narrows significantly as the condition progresses. The goal is to act well before the liver reaches a point where the damage becomes permanent. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is now the most common liver disease in the world. It affects roughly 1 in 4 adults globally, and the rates have been rising in lockstep with the rates of obesity, type 2 diabetes, and metabolic syndrome. Understanding what drives it is the first step toward reversing it. Part 2. The real cause of fatty liver. Here is where we need to get specific because the cause of fatty liver is not simply eating too much fat. This is one of the most persistent and damaging misconceptions about the condition. Fat in the diet is not the primary driver of fat accumulation in the liver. The primary driver is sugar, and more specifically, fructose. To understand why, you need to understand what makes fructose unique among all the sugars and carbohydrates you consume. When you eat glucose, which is the form of sugar your body uses for energy, it can be processed by virtually every cell in your body. The liver handles some of it, but the muscles, the brain, and other tissues all take their share. The metabolic load is distributed widely. Fructose is different. Fructose can only be processed by the liver. It has no other metabolic pathway. When fructose enters your system, 100% of it goes directly to the liver for processing. And here is the problem. The liver was designed to handle small amounts of fructose from natural sources like whole fruit, where the absorption is slow, the quantities are modest, and fiber and vitamin C in the fruit help buffer the effects. The liver was not designed to handle the concentrated loads of fructose that come from added sugars, high fructose corn syrup, sweetened beverages, processed foods, and dried fruits consumed in the quantities that are now completely normal in modern diets. When the liver is overwhelmed with fructose, it converts the excess into fat. That fat is deposited in the liver itself. This is the direct mechanism behind non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Fructose overload leads to hepatic fat accumulation. It also drives insulin resistance in the liver, which makes the entire situation progressively worse over time. There is another dimension to fructose that makes it particularly insidious. Unlike glucose, fructose does not stimulate leptin. Leptin is the hormone your body releases after eating that signals fullness and satiety to your brain. When you eat fructose, your brain does not receive a normal satiety signal. You can consume large amounts of fructose without feeling full. And with continued fructose consumption, the body can develop leptin resistance, which means persistent hunger and impaired satiety signals even with other foods. This creates a cycle where fructose consumption drives overeating, which drives more fructose consumption, which accelerates liver fat accumulation. A study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that just 7 days of a high fructose diet significantly increased lipid deposition in the liver and decreased insulin sensitivity. 7 days. That is how quickly the liver responds to fructose excess. Saturated fat in large amounts also contributes to liver fat accumulation, though its role is secondary to fructose. A double-blind randomized controlled trial that overfed participants with either saturated fat or fructose found that both increased liver fat, but the saturated fat group showed a markedly greater increase in liver fat than the fructose group. This suggests that overconsumption of saturated fat, meaning eating significantly more calories than you need with saturated fat as the primary source, is a genuine contributing factor. The practical implication is not to eliminate saturated fat, but to avoid significantly overeating it, particularly from processed meats, deep-fried foods, and ultra-processed packaged foods. Alcohol deserves mention even though we are focused on the non-alcoholic form of this disease. Alcohol is metabolized almost exclusively in the liver and has a mechanism of causing liver fat accumulation that is very similar to fructose. If you have been diagnosed with fatty liver and you drink regularly, reducing or eliminating alcohol is one of the most impactful things you can do and should be the first change you make. Part 3. The foods and drinks driving your fatty liver. Armed with that understanding, the dietary changes that matter become very clear. Let us go through the most important things to eliminate or dramatically reduce. The single highest priority change is eliminating sugary drinks. This category does more damage to the liver per calorie than almost anything else you eat because the sugar is delivered in liquid form without any fiber to slow its absorption, and it is consumed in quantities that are almost impossible to achieve from whole food sources. Soda is the obvious target, but the drinks that catch people off guard are the ones that are marketed as healthy. Fruit juice is one of the most misunderstood foods in the context of liver health. Orange juice, apple juice, cranberry juice, grape juice, all of these deliver concentrated loads of fructose that hit the liver rapidly and in amounts that far exceed what the liver can handle cleanly. The fact that the sugars are natural does not change the metabolic impact. Natural fructose and added fructose are processed identically by the liver. It does not distinguish between them. Do not be misled by labels that say no added sugar or contains only natural sugars. That language refers to whether sugar was added during manufacturing. It says nothing about the total sugar load you are consuming or how your liver will respond to it. A glass of apple juice with no added sugar can contain 30 to 40 grams of sugar. Your liver processes every gram of that fructose the same way it would process the same amount from a can of soda. Sports drinks and energy drinks are similarly problematic. They are loaded with sugar or high fructose corn syrup, often consumed in large quantities, and frequently positioned as health or performance products. They are not. For someone with fatty liver disease, they are accelerating the damage. Dried fruit is a category that surprises many people. Dates, raisins, dried mango, dried apricots. These are natural and contain vitamins and minerals, but the drying process removes the water content while concentrating the sugar. The fiber that slows fructose absorption in whole fruit is still present, but the volume of fruit required to consume a problematic amount of sugar is dramatically reduced. A small handful of dates can deliver as much fructose as several pieces of whole fruit. When you are actively trying to reverse fatty liver, dried fruit needs to be treated with the same caution as other concentrated sugar sources. After sugary drinks, the next dietary priority is managing your overall carbohydrate quality. While cutting out fructose and added sugar is the highest leverage move, the broader picture of carbohydrate quality matters significantly for liver health. High glycemic carbohydrates, foods that spike blood sugar rapidly, drive repeated surges in insulin. And chronically elevated insulin is a powerful promoter of fat storage in the liver, particularly when the liver is already insulin resistant. The carbohydrates to limit most aggressively are the highly processed, rapidly absorbed varieties. White bread, white rice in large portions, most commercial breakfast cereals, instant oatmeal packets with added sugar, pastries, crackers, chips, and anything made from refined flour. These foods spike blood sugar quickly, demand a large insulin response, and contribute to the hepatic fat accumulation you are trying to reverse. The carbohydrates that are generally fine and in some cases beneficial are those that come packaged with substantial fiber, which slows absorption and dampens the blood sugar response. Vegetables, legumes, whole intact grains, and most whole fruits eaten in reasonable quantities fall into this category. The fiber, the water content, and the structure of whole foods fundamentally change how the carbohydrates in them affect your liver compared to the same amount of sugar extracted and consumed in refined form. A complete elimination of all carbohydrates, as in a strict ketogenic diet, can be very effective for reversing fatty liver, and many people have success with this approach. But it is not a requirement, and for many people, it is not sustainable long-term. The evidence supports both approaches: a low-carbohydrate or ketogenic diet that emphasizes healthy fats, or a moderate carbohydrate diet focused on whole food sources with minimal added sugar. What the evidence does not support is a high-carbohydrate diet dominated by refined carbohydrates and added sugars, regardless of caloric intake. Part 4. What to eat more of. Now let us talk about the other side of the equation: the foods that actively support liver recovery. Protein is one of the most important and most underemphasized nutritional tools for reversing fatty liver. Adequate protein intake helps with satiety, which reduces overall caloric consumption and particularly reduces cravings for sugary foods. It supports the repair of liver tissue, and it helps preserve muscle mass during weight loss, which is important because muscle tissue plays a significant role in insulin sensitivity. There is compelling research showing that the timing and amount of protein at your first meal of the day has an outsized effect on eating behavior throughout the rest of the day. A study of over 9,000 adults found that people who consumed higher protein at their first meal ate significantly less food overall during the day and were less likely to reach for energy-dense, processed, high-sugar foods. People who ate a low-protein first meal showed the opposite pattern. Consistently, higher caloric intake later in the day, with a strong tendency toward the sugary and processed foods that directly worsen fatty liver. A practical target is 25 to 35 grams of protein per meal if you are eating 3 meals per day. Good sources include eggs, fish, chicken, turkey, lean beef in moderation, Greek yogurt with no added sugar, cottage cheese, legumes, and tofu. Eggs deserve particular mention because they are rich in choline, a nutrient that plays a direct role in fat transport and metabolism in the liver. Low choline intake is independently associated with greater liver fat accumulation, and eggs with the yolk intact are one of the most bioavailable sources of choline available. Omega-3 fatty acids from fatty fish, fish oil, or algae-based supplements are another important component of liver recovery. A meta-analysis published in the journal Clinical Nutrition found that omega-3 supplementation, particularly DHA from fish oil, was associated with significant improvements in liver enzymes, including ALT and AST, as well as a measurable reduction in liver fat. The anti-inflammatory effects of omega-3 fatty acids directly counteract the inflammatory processes that drive non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. Coffee is worth mentioning because the evidence here is consistent and somewhat surprising. Multiple observational studies have found that regular coffee consumption is associated with lower rates of fatty liver disease progression and lower liver enzyme levels in people who already have the condition. The mechanism is not fully understood, but appears to involve the antioxidant compounds in coffee reducing hepatic oxidative stress and inflammation. 2 to 3 cups of plain black coffee per day appears to be where the benefit is found. The benefit does not extend to coffee loaded with added sugar and syrups, which would obviously work against your goals. Part 5. Lifestyle changes that accelerate reversal. Diet is the primary lever for reversing fatty liver, but two lifestyle factors have strong enough evidence that they belong in any serious discussion of treatment. The first is exercise. Getting at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity per week has been shown to directly reduce liver fat independent of changes in body weight. Exercise improves insulin sensitivity, reduces hepatic glucose production, increases fat oxidation in the liver, and reduces the inflammatory markers associated with non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. You do not need to lose significant weight for exercise to improve your liver. The metabolic effects of exercise on the liver are partially independent of weight loss. Adding resistance training at least 2 days per week further amplifies the benefit by building and preserving muscle mass, which is one of the primary tissues responsible for absorbing blood glucose and reducing the insulin burden on the liver. A practical starting point if you are currently sedentary is 3 30-minute walks per week. This alone will produce measurable improvements in metabolic markers within weeks. Build from there as your fitness improves. The second lifestyle factor is weight loss. Even modest weight loss has a disproportionately large effect on liver fat. Research shows that losing just 5% of total body weight produces a measurable decrease in hepatic steatosis. Losing 7% of total body weight can produce complete resolution of non-alcoholic steatohepatitis in many cases. You do not need to reach an ideal body weight to see dramatic improvements in your liver. 5 to 10% of current body weight is the target that the evidence supports for meaningful liver recovery. Part 6. The supplements with real evidence. Let us be clear on the context here. You do not need supplements to reverse fatty liver if you are making the dietary and lifestyle changes described in this video. Real food and consistent habits are the primary treatment. But there are 3 supplements with enough clinical evidence behind them to be worth discussing as additions to your regimen. The first is vitamin E. Research has shown that vitamin E supplementation at 800 international units per day is associated with a significantly higher rate of histological improvement in non-alcoholic steatohepatitis compared to placebo. This means it was associated with measurable improvements in actual liver tissue on biopsy, not just blood markers. However, there is an important caveat. High-dose vitamin E, meaning doses greater than 400 international units per day, has been inconsistently associated in some studies with a small increase in all-cause mortality and a possible increase in prostate cancer risk in men. The recommendation to use vitamin E is generally reserved for people with confirmed non-alcoholic steatohepatitis rather than early-stage fatty liver, and it should be discussed with your doctor before starting. The second supplement is omega-3 fatty acids, specifically fish oil. We mentioned the evidence earlier in the food section. If you are not eating fatty fish 2 to 3 times per week, a daily fish oil supplement providing 1 to 2 grams of combined EPA and DHA is a practical alternative. Choose a product that has been third-party tested for purity and oxidation, as fish oil can degrade in quality if it is poorly manufactured or stored. The third area gaining increasing attention is choline supplementation. A recent case control study found that people with high dietary intake of choline had an associated 81% reduction in hepatic steatosis. That is a striking number. However, we still need more conclusive research on whether supplementing choline specifically produces the same results in people who are not already deficient. Until that data is clearer, the practical recommendation is to ensure adequate choline from food first. Eggs with the yolk, lean meats, fish, dairy, and cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and cauliflower are all good dietary sources. The bottom line: Fatty liver disease is one of the most common and most underdiagnosed conditions in the world. It progresses silently, often for years without obvious symptoms, and it can advance from a completely reversible early stage to irreversible cirrhosis if it is not addressed. The fastest way to reverse it is to directly target the primary cause. Cut out or dramatically reduce fructose and added sugar, starting with sugary drinks and fruit juice as your highest priority first step. Reduce refined carbohydrates and prioritize whole food sources with fiber. Eat adequate protein at every meal, particularly at your first meal of the day. Get your omega-3 fatty acids from fatty fish or a quality supplement. Eliminate alcohol or reduce it as much as possible. Exercise consistently, aiming for at least 150 minutes of aerobic activity per week, plus 2 sessions of resistance training. And if you are carrying excess weight, a 5 to 10% reduction in body weight will produce dramatic improvements in liver health that you will be able to see in your blood work within weeks. This is not a slow process when the right changes are made consistently. People who do this correctly see improvements in their liver enzymes and metabolic markers within 4 to 8 weeks. The liver is a remarkably resilient organ. Give it the right conditions and it will heal faster than almost any other organ in the body. Start today, not next week, today. Stay consistent and we will see you in the next one.